if you have a 24 row planter and one row doesn't work, you've got 0 rows planting. But if you have 12 2-row planters and one stops working, you still have 22 rows planting. And those 22, those autonomous rows can plant all night long and they don't mind. It doesn't require the labor. You don't have to have the time for tillage. So you don't need the horsepower for tillage. And so that's kind of the whole model of getting smaller instead of larger, getting lighter so that if a 200-pound man can walk on the soil, we can go do whatever field operation we want to do.
Hello everyone, my name is Victor Justi and welcome to another episode of the Wisenetix Podcast, where we explore leadership, innovation, and communication in agribusiness with the voices who are shaping the future of the industry. Today, we are joined by Jayson Ryner. He's the founder of ReEnvision Ag, a company that is redefining agricultural machinery for the soil health era. Jayson's journey is truly unique, from being a music teacher to become an ag entrepreneur. He's on a mission to transform how farmers approach sustainability and technology. So Jayson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me, Victor.
Oh, you're welcome. So Jayson, to start things off, tell us a little bit about who you are, what drives you, and the mission behind ReEnvision Ag.
Well, I'm an Iowa farm kid. I grew up during the 1980s farm crisis. And as you mentioned, I spent a lot of my working life as a music teacher, about 29 years. Most of it at the community college level, so 18 and 19-year-olds. And I practiced a lot of creativity there. I also hold an MBA, a Master's in Business Administration, with an emphasis in strategy and economics. And that helped me restart my family farm. And now it allows me to teach entrepreneurship and economics and other business classes.
That's great. That's great. So that's awesome. Jayson, I love how your story combines like creativity, business, and purpose. But first, just for us to warm things up a little bit, what's something that made you smile recently?
Well, I've got a couple of college-age sons. And so anything that revolves around them makes me smile. One of my kids said he came out of his biology exam and another professor was there and asked what he was doing. He said, I just got done with the exam. And it wasn't very much time that he would have been in class. And she said, well, how'd you get done so fast? And he said, well, I figured out the easiest way to cheat was really just to master the material. And then it doesn't take you very long to answer the questions. So hearing him, go into something confidently like that, that he really had mastery of the material and he could even surprise the instructor on how fast he got done. That was pretty awesome.
Oh, I totally agree with you. If you know everything, you are unbeatable. So it's even the best way for cheating the test. That makes
cheating.
Sense.
Yeah. Right.
Makes sense, huh?
Wisenetix turns podcast airtime into brand authority. We don't sell ads, we elevate voices. Curious how far your voice can go to become a reference in the industry and attract more leads? Scan the QR code and discover how we can turn your expertise into unmatched brand authority. Let's transform expertise into influence, starting now.
So you have said to me, we have discussed that a few times, that you are a child that comes from the 80s farm crisis. Just share with us how those your early experiences influenced your mindset and eventually led you back to agriculture.
So yeah, my mom and dad would say that there was a lot of time in the 1980s that the best view of the farm was in the rearview mirror when you're driving away from it. My mom and dad raised corn and soybeans, and then we raised feeder pigs as a sideline. And during that time, my dad actually became an early adopter of no-till soybean farming, mainly because he said he could make more money in the hog house than he could running a field cultivator and doing tillage to plant his soybean crop. It was he couldn't make that much more money. The payout wasn't there for the diesel fuel in his time, So he just started no-tilling his soybeans. And in that period of time in north central Iowa, that was pretty progressive, shall we say. And so I had a lot of interest in business. I had a lot of interest in finance. And I started out my major in college as ag finance. And then I realized that sitting across the table from someone like my dad and telling him he could no longer farm didn't sound like fun. I was pretty good at music, pretty good at singing and dancing. And there were a lot of girls in the singing and dancing. And so I decided that would be a good way to change my career and go into the music business and music education specifically. But I think that the farm just always called me back. And when we had those two sons that I spoke of earlier, well, I wanted to be able to teach them to work, and I wanted them to understand what it was to farm and do all these things and be in touch with their food and the accomplishment. And so I think that just drew me back, really, and that made my path to where I am today.
That's awesome. So to be in a farm, it's in your blood, so you cannot run away from that.
That's right.
Some way it came back to your daily routine. That's great. And okay, you mentioned that you are really good in music and in dancing, and I want to know, how did your creative background it shapes your approach to be an entrepreneur today?
Just reflecting back on this, I didn't realize how entrepreneurial you had to be a choir teacher or to put on shows. It's really about entertaining the audience and knowing how to take the audience on an emotional journey. And year after year, I'd get a different set of students, and I wouldn't necessarily know who was going to come together, but how do I take those little parts that I have all over the place and combine them together to make a really good performance and a really good show for the audience. And sometimes it's more challenging than others. Sometimes I had whole bunches of talent, and it was hard to know how to spread it all out. And but so really using that creativity every day after day, to help people experience a great performance for themselves and for the audience members as well, really shaped how I looked at things, because you never can do anything the same way twice. So it really made me extra creative, I think.
I'm honest to say that I have never thought about that, because I've never been a teacher. So every time that you get new students, there's different kind of people that are coming in. You cannot keep doing the same all the time. Of course, you probably have like a way to teach things, but you have to adapt. So you have to improve all the time.
Well, and as a music teacher, the math teacher, nobody comes and watches the students take the final exam, right? And the numbers are the numbers. But as a music teacher, I sold tickets for people to come observe my students take the final exam. And there's a lot more like emphasis on what I did as the teacher or the director than in a lot of the other, disciplines.
Mm-hmm. No, and if you have to sell the tickets, you have to start working like an entrepreneur. You have to have a good product. So
absolutely.
It's already happening, huh? It's
absolutely. Absolutely.
That's awesome. So let's move some years ahead now. And you told me that around 2019, when you realized it, that like the existing planting tools will not work for no-till and cover crop systems. I mean, that is a way to improve. Can you walk us through that turning point and how ReEnvision Ag was born?
So I went back to the farm in 2014. I was 43 years old, but still able, because I'd never had a crop before. I still was a beginning farmer by the government standards, U.S. government programs. I signed up for a beginning farmer program. And with that, I was a no-till and cover crop farmer. Mm-hmm. Then in spring of 2018, we had the wettest year on record where I live, the wettest year ever. And it was a real struggle because the disc openers on the planter, and every manufacturer has these same disc openers. You couldn't get in the field because it was just too wet and it caused too much compaction right around the seed trench. Then in 2019, we had the wettest year on record for the second year in a row. And I went into my dad. I'm like, how else can I do this? Because I'm going to lose money. This is my hobby. It's a $150,000 a year hobby, but it was still, I was still teaching. And I said, if I could just poke each seed into the ground, in the middle of May, it was nice and warm, that it was just the water that was the problem. And he said, no, there's no other way. Everybody does it the same way. And I'm like, well, there's got to be more than one way to do this. And so that's when I started dreaming about another way to plant row crops, and that led to ReEnvision Ag.
So it was your dissatisfaction that made you creating something new and try to figure a way out for solving the way that we are planting so far.
It was really out of necessity, because in 2018 I lost, tens of thousands of dollars on my farming operation. And when my wife agreed to let me go back and start farming, she said, as long as you don't lose any money at it. And I knew I couldn't dare do that again and stay in business, really. Mm-hmm. And so I think just my creativity, that creative process just took over. It wasn't like I really thought about it, but yeah, it just took right on over.
But tell me, what was the thought process when you saw this gap in the market?
So basically it was, what is the simplest way to put a seed in the ground 2 inches to plant corn? And I started asking my farmer friends, what's the simplest way? Because the simplest way isn't to run a double disc opener through the whole length of the field, and I thought back in kindergarten, most of us, we get a styrofoam cup and put dirt in it in the springtime and poke a seed in with our finger. And that's really a common kindergarten activity, to grow a plant. And we started thinking about how to do that. And this group of friends was kind of curious, and we just started brainstorming it. And we thought about using a air nailer to blow the seed into the ground and shoot it in there. And we decided, well, we wouldn't know how much air pressure to use. And just started looking around. And then we came up with this idea of a spike that goes in the ground and then a pin that pushes the seed into the soil.
That's awesome. That's incredible. And you described the ReEnvision Ag as a building hardware for the soil health era. Tell us, what does it mean in the practice, and why do we need these new tools for this new chapter in agriculture?
We turned over the prairie with the moldboard plow by John Deere. And in the spring of 23 or 24, John Deere made their last moldboard plow. And so I kind of define that as the tillage era, right? And that the beginning and ending of the moldboard plow really define the beginning and ending of the tillage era. And now we know that by tilling the soil, we release all kinds of carbon. So we can use the soil as a carbon sink, and not let that carbon be released from the soil. We also know that when we till the soil, the particles of the dirt break down and get really fine, and they don't hold as much water, and it's harder for the crop to grow through it. And there's just all kinds of things that we've learned about soil health and the microbiome and all the little critters, I call them, all the little critters that live in the dirt, and that leaving it alone and letting them do their own thing really is very advantageous for being sustainable, in that we aren't losing topsoil as we grow food for the world. But just the overall building up of topsoil. Instead of losing it, we're actually building it. It's becoming more rich. We have higher nutrient density in our food. And there's just all kinds of reasons that we want to have that soil be left lay. And then with cover crops, we've learned that having that living root, even in the part of the world where I am, it gets cold and the ground freezes, but actually having a living root, even if it's dormant in the soil, really helps that soil biome to be able to do its job. And so that's kind of this new era that we're going into. All of the tools have been made for the previous era. And at ReEnvision Ag, we're making the first planter designed specifically for this soil health era, where the tool is made for the conditions we're going to have going forward instead of those conditions that we've had for the last 100 years.
Okay, so it's like predicting the needs of the soil and already creating a solution for it.
There are enough no-tillers around and there are enough cover crops around that we can now see, like, when there's no tillage to dry out the soil, so the soil stays wet longer. Mm-hmm. And the cover crops cover up the soil to keep the sun off, so the soil stays wet longer. So how are we going to put a seed into that new type of condition? We've experienced it enough to know what the new type of condition is going to be with extra soil residue on top. And so then how do we plant into that?
That's awesome. And I was remembering that during some of our conversations that you say that the traditional OEMs, they are focusing bigger and faster, while I believe that the future is more smaller, nimble, and autonomous. Can you explain how you see this shift and why it matters?
So with climate changing, we're experiencing bigger rainfalls, more frequent rainfalls. And we've actually experienced, according to Iowa State, we've lost 27% of the days suitable for spring field work. And at the same time, the farms just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger because you have to have more acres to pay for the big expensive machinery. And so that then the only solution becomes, well, we got to go faster, right? So to go faster, the equipment's got to be wider and it's got to move faster. Well, all that does is, it requires horsepower, and all that horsepower goes into the ground as compaction. And the way that we look at it at ReEnvision Ag is that the equipment can't get all that much bigger because the soil itself just can't hold it up. The bigger, heavier equipment causes more compaction, which means we have to use tillage. Well, if we're trying to get rid of tillage, then we got to get rid of the weight on the field. And that means smaller, more nimble equipment. And the smaller equipment costs less per unit. Now you need more units. So the trick is, how do I create a power source and a planter that can plant the same area with the same amount of time? Well, one way is to widen the planting window. And that's what we've done with ReEnvision Ag with our seed spike. And the other way is to make it autonomous so that it can work 24/7, 360. It can keep going. It never gets tired. It doesn't have to go as fast. And if you have a 24-row planter and one row doesn't work, you've got 0 rows planting. But if you have 12 2-row planters and one stops working, you still have 22 rows planting. And those 22, those autonomous rows can plant all night long and they don't mind. It doesn't require the labor. You don't have to have the time for tillage. So you don't need the horsepower for tillage. And so that's kind of the whole model of getting smaller instead of larger, getting lighter so that if a 200-pound man can walk on the soil, we can go do whatever field operation we want to do. And that's kind of our goal.
Oh, and that's incredible. And at the same time, I think what's going to be a good solution is because probably it's going to be something more cheaper. So you can reach not just like larger farmers, but even the smaller one, they can adopt a solution for that, like that.
Yeah. So, I did a whole bunch of research on field sizes. And if you take a regular quarter section in the United States, 160 acres. You divide it in half. You have an 80-acre chunk that's a rectangle that is twice as deep as it is wide. And I mapped out if you planted the corn perfectly, like every 6 inches, just perfect spacing all the way around. And then you drive a sprayer with a big 120-foot boom. And you drive through there and you drive perfect, you're going to drive over a certain amount of corn stalks. And nobody's going to drive perfect, right? So we're going to take out more than we can. But if you just drive perfect, the number of corn plants that get killed by driving over them, if you take instead just plant straight with no end rows, and you leave 5 feet on each end for a little nimble robot to turn around in, you end up harvesting more ears of corn. And that number goes up, and that efficiency goes up anytime that the field becomes smaller than 80 acres or more irregular in shape. Now, certainly there's some big fields, where there's hundreds of acres together, and maybe this won't be the advantage for those people right away. If a farmer has got a 36 or 48 row planter and you drive for 2 miles before you turn around, it might not be the case. But for a lot of these smaller farms and in the state of Iowa, the vast majority of farms are smaller than 80 acres and have irregular shapes. It really makes a lot more sense to use small, lightweight, nimble equipment than go in with big, heavy equipment. And so smaller farmers then can have a lower amount of equipment on their capitalization table. They have less debt to pay for that equipment, and they can get by on fewer acres. And, quite frankly, there's enough acres of each type to have more than one system available.
No, that's fantastic. So you're democratizing the technology. You're bringing like advanced tools for more accessible for like smaller farms. It's amazing, and at the same time committed with sustainability, because just a win-win. I just can see like good aspects.
We talk about, say, the United States or Brazil or the Ukraine, where the big broad acres are. That's one thing, but in places like India and Africa, the fields are smaller. And then we have small fields in Ukraine and United States and Brazil and Argentina, right? So as we do this and we allow the democratization of agriculture, where someone can buy a smaller piece of equipment and still do the job and maybe own their own farm, a smaller farm, but they're owning it all, that keeps the wealth in the rural areas. Like, instead of big investors coming in and buying cropland and then taking that wealth away, we can create opportunities for people in rural areas to maybe own a smaller piece of ground, but they can at least own it and continue to build that wealth up, like our previous generations have. And that's a big part of going to the small scale as well.
Oh, that's great. So it's like bringing the technology and the efficiency that we have in 21st century at the same time working, or in the way that people used to do like centuries ago. It's really good.
Exactly.
Without so many effort that people have to go to the ground and do it handily.
There are places in India where their seed production is done by hand. Like, the seeds are planted by hand to make their seeds for the broadacre crops. Well, they're looking at skipping the last 100 years of machinery development and going from a person planting it by hand to an autonomous robot, and skipping all of the steps in between. And that's really an amazing thing when you start thinking about it.
So that's fantastic, Jayson. And I was wondering here, because you mentioned you also mentioned to me that you also teach entrepreneurship and marketing, and I could see that by learning about this revolutionary solutions that you are bringing to the market, to the market, to the producers. But tell me how teaching entrepreneurship, how it influenced the way that you lead your company and you're developing your products?
Well, one of the really big things that I've learned is that when you have your own company and you have your own website and you have your own social media links and I'm doing all of these different things, when I talk about them in class, then the students go out and they look at what you're actually doing in practice. And then they come into the classroom and they say, Mr. Ryner, you told us that you should be doing it that we should be doing it this way. But when I look at what you're doing, you're not doing it that way. And so it really keeps my eyes on best practices in marketing, so that really how entrepreneurship affects my teaching. Right. And then I spend a lot of time, in this ivory tower of this is the perfect way to do it. And that's what, in higher ed, we get accused of, probably correctly, that we live in this high ivory tower and that in real practice, you got to do it this way. Well, by having that real practice on the outside, then my students get to benefit from, I've gone out and asked people for 6-figure checks, right? And raised money to keep a startup going. I've done all of these things in real practice. So, sometimes the ivory tower is not all that accurate in practice. So in theory is the same as practice, but in practice is not the same as theory. So
I would say
that allows me to share those two sides and practical experience with my students.
Knowing exactly what you have to do, it doesn't mean that you are able or you can do that in practical, as you said. There's a phrase, I'll try to translate that for English. Probably there's something related, which is do what I'm telling you to do, not what I'm doing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Do what I'm telling you to do. Don't do what I am doing. So.
And the other thing is, you talk about failure, right? Especially today's college students, they've never been like, there's no bullying anymore. And everybody, we all get participation trophies. In entrepreneurship, you get kicked in the teeth pretty hard. Like this is really, really hard. And, defining what success is and there really isn't failure until you have a failure to learn. Right. So as long as you're learning and applying that new knowledge and not making the same mistakes over and over again, there's always successes to draw from. And I think that that's just really important to understand, both as an educator, but also as an entrepreneur, and to pass that along, that I've never gone on a site visit with my planter where everything went perfect. Right. And so, sometimes the goal has to change midway through so that we can have success. But it's really, learning. Every time you're doing something, you're always learning, you're always reapplying. And then failure is we'll let somebody else worry about failure.
Yes, I totally agree with you. And I have learned that you just fail when you quit.
Right.
Because if you don't quit, if you keep pushing, if you keep turning around the problems, overcoming it, some way, somehow you're going to be there. You're going to reach and achieve what you're looking to get, right? And they also say that usually when you quit, you were like about the final step to reach there, but you have quit, so you lost the prizes.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
That's great. So, as you are someone that are balancing education and entrepreneurship, how do you keep that creative energy alive at the same time that you're managing risk and innovation?
Part of it is that I keep my role at ReEnvision Ag as the CEO, the visionary leader. I'm not a detail guy. We have engineers who are detail guys, right? And so I've got to stay out of the weeds and keep my thinking going forward. And part of the teaching, it's really interesting because some of the students come in and they have a really hard time, like thinking outside of the box. We start them in kindergarten, we put them in line and we make them follow in line and here's where the guardrails are and don't go outside of them. And so some of the students, it's really hard for them to get away from the guardrails. Other students though are, these real entrepreneurial thinkers are, you tell them to get out of the box and they'll say, what box, And so those students are the ones that really help me keep going and really keep my creative juices flowing. But also it's really not getting bogged down. First off, it's not what I'm really good at, right? I'm not really good at the the small details, intricate details. I'm not good at those, right? I'm really good at the big picture. And so keeping my head in that space is really the key.
And just reflecting here, do you think that this entrepreneur spirit, it's something that we developed or we just born with that?
I've always been a restless soul. So I know that I was born with it. Like when I was an infant, my parents and my sister, who's 2.5 years older than me, they moved to the main level of the house and left my bedroom upstairs because I was such a noisy baby, a noisy sleeper. Nobody else could sleep. And I'd thrash around and roll around. And so I've always been a restless soul. So I think some of it is born into us. But then it's about risk tolerance, right? Are you willing to make that bet? Are you willing to take that risk? We're taught our risk tolerance from our parents and mentors, but also, some of us are just more comfortable with taking risk and not worry about failure. What happens if X, Y, and Z happens? Well, I don't know. We'll know when we get there, And so, yeah, if you're the kind of person that will go out and get in your car and flip a quarter to decide which way to turn, right? That's the I don't care, risk tolerance part of it. So it's a little bit nature and a little bit nurture for sure.
There's something that I always reflect about that is sometimes we are so afraid about failing, about what if it doesn't work? And we just forget that there's just one life to be lived and you have to place your bets, you have to try it. If you fail, just chin up, just get up, stand up and try again or change anything. So
yeah, well, and there's lots of songs written about it, like Garth Brooks standing outside the fire. Are you going to stand outside the fire or are you going to jump in the fire? Like, where are you going to be? And certainly there are all kinds of people who are risk averse, but they take care of the details for me, right? They make this everything. They put the building blocks together, and that's awesome that we have that kind of person. We need those kinds of people. We need that diversity of thought, right?
Yes. I'd say that actually there's no wrong behavior that we are talking. It's like all of us, we should work as a body, a single body. So every part of the body has its importance, right? So
that's part of building a team, right? When you're building the team, and I did that in the early part of my career, building choirs, right? What's your job in this group? Your job is to sing high. Your job is to sing low. Your job is to sing pretty, and your job is to sing soft. So there's all kinds of it. Yeah.
Before we wrap up here, Jayson, I'd love to ask something that connects both business and your teaching side. How important is establishing brand authority, thought leadership in the agriculture industry today? And how you are doing that and how you are incorporating it in your strategy at ReEnvision Ag?
Leadership, I believe in a servant leadership model where it's my job as the leader to enable the people on my team, right? To give them the tools that they need. So if they're struggling with something, well, what do you need to be able to complete this? Do you need another person? Do you need more help? And that's, from like within the company leadership structure, that is just something that I've learned and really think it's the right way to go. I think we get the most out of our people when we enable them. And sometimes that means that we enable them and they continue to grow and grow and grow, and then they leave. Well, that's okay, right? So as a teacher, I'd get a new set of students in every year, and I'd grow them and grow them and grow them, and half of them would leave, and then the new bunch would come in, and I'd grow them and grow them and grow them. And that's really, I think from my educational experience and now what I apply as a business leader is that servant leadership model. And then from the visionary side, like the big picture side, being able to go out and articulate the points of why we can change. Because most of us as humans, we're change is not really always a good, change is a 4-letter word, and so showing a path to a new idea, showing a path to change that is not adversarial, right? Because if we're going to go like this, well, the status quo is going to win every time, because more people are going to get behind that status quo. But rather, shine a light, show a different path, and illuminate the reasons to take that path are really the important part, for me in leadership within the ag community, within the state of Iowa and all the way worldwide, right? To understand that there is a way to democratize, shrink the size, and keep the wealth in rural areas of our countries.
That's great. That's awesome. Okay, Jayson, for us let's do like a final rapid fire here. Okay, I'm gonna question and just answer the first thing that came to your mind. Let's start that. One book that changed how you think.
Thinking in Bets by Annie Duke.
If you have 30 seconds to pitch the future of farming to policymakers, what would you say?
Wow, 30 seconds. How many seconds do I have to think of an answer?
Take your time.
The future of agriculture is a sustainable future that we can put on repeat. And the best way is the way that nature was, over billions of years of evolution or creation, depending upon your point of view. The natural systems are there, and we need to get out of the way of the natural systems instead of trying to apply some other kind of paradigm. The natural systems are the way they are because that's what worked over time and through history. And let's get back to them. Precise planting, leaving the soil as undisturbed as possible, and really growing good, healthy food in abundance for the whole world.
Wow, good. I like that. Okay, last one. Something that most people don't know about you.
Something that most people don't know about me. Well, I seem like an extrovert, and I am an extrovert. Like, I do thrive around being with people. When I'm in a room with people, I'm much more productive, but there is a time where I have to be all alone by myself and really decompress, because if I'm with people all the time, I just get so wrapped up in it and I explode. So everybody wants me to have some time to decompress, whether they know it or not.
That's great. I agree with you. And I feel the same. I have to confess it. That's great. Jayson, thank you very much. It has been such an inspiring and insightful conversation that we are having and that you had today. And for those that are looking to connect with you and to follow your journey, what's the best way?
So the website is ReEnvisionAg.com. We have a YouTube channel. If you go into YouTube and search for ReEnvision Ag, you can see all kinds of videos and go back through, and please subscribe to that channel. And you can follow ReEnvision Ag on LinkedIn, or me personally on LinkedIn. The company is ReEnvision Ag, and I'm at Jayson Ryner, and would love to have everybody following along and and get feedback from you all on where we're going and how we're making this new revolutionary planter for groundbreaking agricultural innovation.
That's great. So thank you for joining us today, Jayson. Thanks for sharing your experience, your vision, and the passion for the next generation of the agriculture. And to our listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and share. Stay tuned for more conversations with leaders that, as Jayson, they are driving innovation and purpose in the agribusiness. Until next time, see you.